She was only 18 when her life changed in a way she never expected. Folks in the old frontier towns whispered about her for months, saying the young plains girl had no business tying her future to an Apache warrior. Some claimed she did it out of fear. Others said it was fate. But the truth was something no one else in the territory ever understood. She married him because she felt something in his eyes that day, something steady and powerful, something that held her breath without touching her at all. Her name was Leora, a quiet girl with courage she never spoke of. She grew up in a broken cabin at the far end of the valley. Raised by a mother who worked the soil with hands worn from wind and winter, Leora was gentle but not weak. She had learned early that silence could hold more strength than any shout. She carried that silence deep inside her, like a lantern no storm could blow out. The Apache warrior she married was Ketan. People said his presence felt like a mountain shadow falling across the land. Tall, strong, and watchful, he had the kind of calm that warned men more than anger ever could. His tribe respected him. Settlers feared him. But Leora saw something else in him from the first moment their paths crossed. She saw a man who carried old wounds the way others carried memories, tucked deep beneath the skin where no one dared to look. Their marriage was not something she planned. It grew from a promise her father made long before he died, a promise rooted in an agreement between families. But Leora never heard the full story. She only knew that one sunrise. Ketan arrived at her door with the solemn weight of tradition on his shoulders and asked her mother for her hand. The whole valley buzzed for days. People expected Leora to break down or run. She did neither. She stood calm, looked at Ketan, nodded with a steady breath. Maybe it was because she had lived her whole life fighting for scraps of peace. Maybe she believed the warrior would protect her in ways no one else had. Or maybe, deep in some hidden part of her heart, she knew that her story was meant to take this wild turn. Whatever the reason, she walked into that union with quiet steps and a heart full of unspoken hope. The wedding was held in a circle of firelight on the open land. Apache elders prayed in their language. The wind pushed warm dust around their feet. Leora felt the flames glow against her skin, and for a moment, she wondered if this was the night she had been moving toward all her life. Ketan took her hand with surprising gentleness, his touch steady but patient. As if he understood her fear without needing to hear it. Everyone noticed something that night. He looked at her differently. Not with possession, but with a kind of protective claim that grew stronger each time she looked back. They barely spoke, but the silence between them was not empty. It felt like a rope slowly tightening, pulling their fates together in a way neither could deny. By the time the fire faded low, and the moon rose bright over the plains, the last of the guests drifted away. Only Leora and Ketan remained standing near the dying embers. He studied her the way a man studies a new path through dangerous land, careful and thoughtful. Leora's heart thumped against her ribs, not from fear of him, but from the fear of the unknown that waited for her now. When they returned to his lodge, built from hides and timber, she froze at the doorway. She had seen the outside before. She had imagined the inside many times, but she never expected the sight that met her eyes. The room was warm, lit by one soft flame. Furs lay across the floor, thick and inviting. A heavy bed sat in the corner, built wider and stronger than any she had ever slept in. That bed had been the center of every whisper in town. Folks claimed an Apache warrior's bed was a place a young woman should fear. Not because of violence, but because of the storm of emotions it held. Too close. Too intimate. Too unknown. Leora remembered every rumor as she stood in the doorway. Her breath trembled in her chest. Ketan stepped behind her, close enough that she felt the warmth of his breath near her hair. His voice, low and deep, brushed against her ear. "You do not need to fear me. Not tonight. Not any night. Only speak and I will listen." The kindness in his tone unnerved her. She was ready for a strong man, maybe even a cold one, but not a gentle warrior whose touch held more quiet strength than any weapon he carried. When she turned toward him, she saw a softness in his eyes that she had never expected. The warrior so many feared now looked at her as if she was the only thing in the room that mattered. He lifted a hand, slow enough for her to step away if she wished. She didn't. His fingers brushed her cheek. Her breath caught. This was the moment she had imagined and feared, the moment she knew would change something inside her forever. She felt her pulse race, not from dread but from something new, something warm that made her knees unsteady. Khitan studied her face. His thumb moved gently, as if memorizing the shape of her fear. "You are safe here, Leora, safe with me." His words should have eased her heart. Instead, they stirred a flood of questions she couldn't voice. Why did he look at her like he had waited for her all his life? Why did he hold her like she was something precious? Why did she feel her chest tighten each time he breathed near her? The night deepened around them. The flame flickered along the walls. Leora felt the pull of the bed behind her, the weight of her new life settling around her shoulders. And yet, despite everything she feared, she found herself stepping closer to him. Her hands lifted, almost without her knowing, stopping just inches from his chest. Ketan's breath slowed when he saw her move. The way he looked at her shifted. The calm in his eyes warmed into something deeper, something that made her heart tremble in her ribs. Leora understood then why the bed once frightened her. It wasn't the bed itself. It was the closeness it promised, the truth she would have to face about herself and about the man who now stood before her. Before she could speak, a sharp noise echoed outside the lodge. A crack through the night air, like a branch breaking under heavy weight. Ketan's expression changed in an instant. The softness vanished. His warrior instinct rose fast and fierce as he turned toward the sound. Leora froze, her heart pounding. He lifted a hand silently, telling her not to move. The warm flame light flickered. The wind pressed against the hide walls. The sound came again, louder this time, closer. Carrying a warning neither of them could ignore. Something, or someone, was outside their home, and Khitan knew exactly who it might be. He reached for his knife. Leora stepped back, breath tight in her throat. Their wedding night was no longer just about fear of the unknown. Something dangerous was coming toward them, and it had been waiting for the moment she became his wife. Khitan stood at the entrance of the lodge, like a stone carved by centuries of storms. His hand stayed firm on the hilt of his knife, the blade still hidden but ready to rise. The second trouble took shape. Leora watched him from the soft glow near the fire. Her heartbeat felt loud in her ears, steady drum that matched the restless wind pushing against the hides. She had seen him as a warrior before, but never with this sudden change, never with the sharpness that now tightened his jaw. Something outside had stirred a part of him she had not yet learned. Not fierce anger, not fear. Something older, something buried deep in Apache blood and frontier law. He did not blink. He did not breathe like an ordinary man. Every sense he had turned outward to catch the smallest sign. Leora stepped closer, soft as a shadow. Khitan raised his hand again, signaling her to stay where she was. She stopped, but her eyes stayed locked on his back. The fire crackled behind her, throwing restless light along the walls. Outside, the night stretched wide over the land, filled with sounds that most people never heard. She knew the usual noises of the plains, the cry of the wind, the call of night birds, the rustle of dry grass. But this sound was different, heavy, purposeful. Khitan finally stepped forward and pushed the door flap aside. Cold air rushed inside, brushing Leora's skin like the touch of an unwelcome hand. She waited for Khitan to speak, but he said nothing. He moved out into the darkness without a sound. It's the way only trained men do. Leora hesitated for a breath, then followed him toward the doorway, staying just far enough to keep from slowing him down. Outside, the land stretched in a blanket of deep night. The moon had slipped behind clouds, leaving only thin strips of silver across the ground. Khitan stood still, listening. Leora could barely see his silhouette, but she saw the tension in his shoulders. A moment later, he knelt and ran his fingers across the dirt. He lifted his hand to his face, smelling the trace of something only he could read. Then he spoke, voice low and steady. There were men here, 2 of them. Leora felt her stomach tighten. She looked around, but saw nothing except brush and shadow. How long were they here? Long enough, he said, rising slowly. The trail leads back toward the ridge. She stepped beside him, careful not to touch him while his senses were high and sharp. Who would come here tonight? Many can come to a warrior's land, he answered, his eyes fixed on the dark fields. Some come with respect. Some come for warning. Some come with danger. Leora shivered at the tone in his voice. She had heard settlers speak of raiders, bounty hunters, or men looking to stir trouble between tribes. But she sensed this wasn't just random mischief. Something felt personal. Ketan's stance told her so. The way he scanned the ridge, the way his eyes narrowed. He motioned toward the lodge, guiding her back inside with a firm hand on her arm. She stepped in without protest. He followed, letting the door flap fall closed behind them. Leora stood near the fire again. Ketone remained by the entrance, staring at the door as if the night itself needed watching. She had so many questions rising inside her, but she knew better than to bury him under them now. Still, silence felt too tight around her. She finally asked, soft as breath, "Does this have to do with why you came for me?" Before the wedding, Ketan's head turned slowly. His eyes met hers. The firelight caught the deep brown of his gaze, turning it warm for a moment before the shadows returned. "Leora, you and I were tied by a promise made long before you were born. But promises do not bring trouble. Men do." She stepped closer. "What men?" He hesitated, as if weighing how much truth she was ready to carry. Then he answered, "There are those who think our marriage gives them reason to question old agreements. Some fear the bond between my people and yours. Some hate it." Leora swallowed. Her father never told her the full story behind the agreement. She only knew there was an understanding between her family and Ketan's people, one forged in fire and loyalty. Ketan's voice softened as he continued, "Your father saved the life of my uncle in a time when bloodshed ruled this land. They made a pact, a bond of peace between two families. But peace is not loved by all." Leora tried to picture her father, a man she lost too young, standing beside warriors and forging such a promise. She had never imagined his past reached so far beyond their small cabin. Before she could speak again, Ketan stepped closer. He looked at the fire a long moment before continuing. "The men who came here tonight," he said quietly, "were hunting for a sign. They want to know if our union makes me weak or strong. If you are a shield for me, or a chain," her breath caught. "A chain. Some men see love as weakness," he said with a slow breath. "Some see marriage as a way to strike at a warrior's heart." Leora felt her pulse race. She had known fear before, but never this kind. Not fear of harm, but fear of being tangled in a deeper war she never meant to step into. Ketan watched her carefully, reading the worry that rose in her eyes. "I will not let them touch you," said. His voice held no dramatic weight, no bragging tone. It was a simple truth, spoken by a man who had already given his life to this vow. She felt warmth rush through her chest, mixing with fear, forming something new, but she still had questions, Ketan. She whispered, "What did they want?" His jaw tightened. "They wanted to know if you are truly mine now." Leora froze. Her cheeks warmed. Her breath slipped unevenly. The meaning behind his words ran deeper than the surface. Tonight was their first night as husband and wife. In Apache tradition and in frontier belief, a marriage was not fully recognized until it was sealed by the bond between two souls. Some men believed a warrior was vulnerable before that moment. Others believed he was more dangerous. Her heart began to thump in her chest. "So they came because they thought you would be distracted, yes?" Her breath shook a little. "And were you?" Ketan stepped closer, slow and sure. The firelight warmed the angles of his face. His eyes held a calm that she couldn't look away from. "I was watchful," he said, "not distracted. I knew someone might test this night." She looked at the ground, then back up at him. "This marriage is more than I understood." Ketan's gaze softened for the first time since the noise outside. "It is more than what most in your valley understood." Leora walked toward the fire, letting the warmth reach her chilled skin. The weight of everything she had learned swirled through her chest. Her father's pact, Ketan's bloodline, the men who hid in the night, her own place in this union that held history older than she knew. She looked up again as Khitan moved toward the wall. Placing his weapons on a stand carved from wood and bone, he touched each one with quiet focus, checking for damage. Leora watched him, seeing the man behind the legend. The warrior who lived with the knowledge that trouble waited for him on every horizon. The man who now tied his future to hers. Kaetn. He turned. She hesitated before speaking. What if those men come back? They will, he answered simply. Those who test a warrior never stop with one night. Her heart tightened. She stepped closer, wanting to feel closer to understanding him. Why do they hate this union so much? He took a slow breath. Because you bridge to worlds, Leora, and there are men on both sides who fear the bridge more than the war. His words lingered in the warm air between them. She stared at him, trying to process the weight of being the center of a conflict she never invited. Yet strangely, she didn't feel regret. Instead, she felt something stirring in her. Something sharp and new and alive. Before she could speak, the wind outside shifted again. This time, the sound was different. A distant drum. Slow, heavy, unmistakable. Khitan's head snapped toward the door. Leora's breath froze. A drum in the night meant only one thing. Someone was sending a message, and the message was meant for Khitan. The drumbeat rolled through the night like a slow heartbeat across the valley. Leora felt it thrum through the wooden floor beneath her feet, steady and deliberate, as if someone far away was calling out to the land itself. Khitan stood completely still, listening hard. The fire cast long shadows across his face, sharpening the lines of tension already carved into his jaw. Leora had heard drums at festivals before, at peace gatherings, at celebrations. But this sound was different. There was no joy in it, no rise or fall, no invitation for dance. It carried weight, warning, decision, the kind of sound men made when they wanted to be heard without speaking. Khitan stepped closer to the door, his shoulders tense. He didn't move beyond the threshold yet, and that alone scared her more than the drum itself. She walked toward him slowly. What does it mean? Khitan did not look back at her right away. When he did, his eyes had shifted from warm earth to something sharper, something filled with memory. It is a call to counsel. Not for celebration. For judgment, the word felt heavy. Judgment, her breath tightened. For you? He nodded once. And for anyone tied to me, the fire crackled behind them, but it no longer felt warm. Leora wrapped her arms around herself, though she wasn't sure if she was cold or simply shaken. Who is calling you? Khitan stepped outside, and Leora followed him to the doorway. He scanned the sky, listening for the rhythm again. The drumbeat carried a pattern unique to certain clans. It is Hawk Ridge. They want my presence. Leora remembered the stories she had heard whispered by settlers. Hawk Ridge was known for strict warriors, men who followed the old ways to the letter. They tolerated no broken promises, no weak bonds, no divided loyalty. Some said they lived by law older than the land itself. Others said they held anger that never cooled. Ketan looked out over the ridge. The wind tugged at the tide strands in his hair. Hawkridge does not call for talk unless something threatens balance. Leora swallowed hard. And they think our marriage threatens it. Khitan didn't answer at first. His silence was enough. As the drumbeats continued, Leora's thoughts spun toward the men who had come earlier. Men who believed she was a chain around Ketan's strength. Men who questioned his loyalty. Men who hated the bridge she represented between two worlds. Khitan finally stepped back inside, closing the hide door behind him. He didn't pace. He didn't show fear. He settled on one knee near the fire and stared into the flames with a heavy gaze. Leora sat across from him, nervously twisting her fingers together. "Tell me everything," she said quietly. He drew a slow breath, as if preparing to reveal something buried deep. "My uncle, the one your father saved, was a respected elder among our people. His voice carried weight, even in Hawk Ridge. When the pact was made between him and your father, the valley entered a time of peace. Trade became safe. Travel became safe. But when he died 2 winters ago, the men who opposed the pact began to rise again. Leora leaned forward. "And they blame you." "I carry his blood," Keaton said. "They believe I should follow his path or abandon it. They do not accept a path between." Leora felt the words cut deeper than she expected. A path between. That was exactly what she represented. A mixture of two worlds tied to him by vows old and new. The men outside wanted him to choose one world and leave the other behind. Her presence made that choice impossible. The wind outside rattled the walls. The drumbeat continued, steady and slow, like a challenge whispered across the plains. "What will they ask of you at this council?" she asked. Keaton looked directly at her now. "They will ask if I stand with Hawk Ridge or with the Valley. They will ask if our marriage is loyalty or betrayal. They will ask if you weaken me or strengthen me." Leora's breath hitched. "And what will you say?" Keaton did not answer. Not because he didn't know, but because the truth was complicated, tangled in history and honor. His silence frightened her more than a storm. He finally stood and reached for his cloak. "I must go to them. Tonight," she whispered. "The drum calls tonight," he said. "If I delay, they will take it as refusal." Leora rose quickly, her heart heavy. The thought of him walking into the darkness alone chilled her more than the night air. "What if they try to hurt you?" Keaton fastened the cloak around his shoulders. "Then they will see a fight they did not prepare for." She reached out and took his wrist without thinking. Her hand was small against his skin, but the touch made him pause. Keaton looked down at her fingers, then into her eyes. "Take me with you," she said. His expression changed. Immediately, "No, you cannot be near that fire." "Why not?" "Because they will see you as the question they want to erase." The message sank in with sharp clarity. If she appeared with him, some might see it as a challenge. Others as an insult. Others as a weakness. She could become the spark in a place already filled with dry grass. Keaton touched her hand gently and lowered it from his arm. "Leora, I will come back before sunrise." The promise felt thin, stretched over too much uncertainty, but she nodded because she knew she had no right to hold him back. He stepped toward the door again and then stopped, turning slightly locked the door. "Do not open it until I return." The words cut through her chest. She watched him leave, her heart pulling in two directions. The door flap closed behind him. Leaving her alone with the fire and the echo of the drum, she stood still for a long moment, listening to the night. The silence inside the lodge pressed around her. Her thoughts roamed through everything she had learned. Her father's pact. Keaton's position. The men hiding in shadows. The warriors on the ridge who wanted to judge their union. She moved closer to the door, but didn't open it. Instead, she pressed her ear against the hide, listening to the faint footsteps fading into darkness. The drum kept calling him farther and farther away. Leora paced the room, unable to sit. Every crackle of the fire made her jump. Every gust of wind felt like a whisper from something unseen. She felt too vulnerable, too exposed, as if the land outside was watching her now. Weighing her worth just like the warriors would weigh Keaton's, a sudden sound made her spin. Not wind, not fire. A faint scrape near the back wall of the lodge. Her heart hammered. She stepped back, her breath shaking. She stared hard at the shadows. The scrape came again, soft but clear. Someone was there. She forced herself to speak. "Who is that?" No answer. She backed up until her legs touched the bed. The scrape came once more, but this time it was followed by a small voice, careful and soft. Laura stepped from the shadows, thin, wrapped in a wool shawl too large for her shoulders. Her face was pale with fear, her eyes wide. Leora had never seen her before. She couldn't be older than 12. Leora stepped closer slowly. "Who are you?" The girl looked around as if expecting someone dangerous to burst inside at any moment. Then she spoke, barely more than a whisper. "My name is Nira. I came down from Hawk Ridge. I followed the men who came earlier. I heard things I should not have heard. Leora knelt down, trying to keep her voice steady. What things the girl swallowed? They are not judging Keaton. They are hunting him. And you? Leora's heart stopped. Why, Nia looked toward the door, as if the darkness might swallow them both. Because if Keaton refuses their demand, someone else will take his place. And that man has sworn to destroy the pact your father made. Leora felt the world tilt. Who is this man? Nira hesitated, trembling. His name is Tecker. He believes your marriage curses the land. Leora felt cold rush across her skin. She had heard the name once before, whispered in passing by a trader. Tecker, a warrior known for harsh judgments. A man who refused outsiders. A man who saw peace as weakness. Before Leora could speak again, Nira grabbed her hand. You cannot let Keaton go to that council alone. Tecker has set a trap. He wants to end the bond between your people and ours by ending Keaton himself. Leora felt the fire behind her flicker hard. Sending sparks into the air, outside the drumbeat grew faster. Nira's grip tightened. If you do not stop him, you will hear that drum again before dawn. And the beat will not be calling for counsel. It will be calling for death. For a moment, Leora could not breathe. The fire behind her seemed to dim, shadows gathering around the walls as if the lodge itself understood the danger settling over them. Nira's small hand clung to hers with surprising strength. The girl's eyes carried a fear far too old for someone so young. And that alone told Leora she was not lying. Leora steadied her voice. How do you know all this? Nira looked down at her worn shoes, her voice trembling. My brother served Hawk Ridge. He followed Tecker. He believed everything Tecker said until he saw what Tecker planned. He tried to warn someone, but he was caught. Her breath hitched. They heard him for speaking. He ran. He told me to hide. Then he told me to watch the men in the valley. To watch what Tecker was doing, Leora felt her chest tighten. She touched the girl's shoulder gently. Where is your brother now? Nira's lip quivered. He is gone. Leora swallowed her grief for her. I am so sorry. But the wind outside pushed hard against the lodge, reminding them both that sorrow could wait. Danger could not. Tell me exactly what Tecker plans, she said. Nea stepped closer to the fire as if cold had seeped into her bones. Tecker wants to take Keaton's place as the voice of Hawk Ridge, but first he must prove Keaton is weak. The council tonight is no council. It is a trap. When Keaton walks into the circle, Tecker will accuse him of breaking the old promise. He will say, the pact is a lie. And when Keaton tries to defend it, Tecker will strike. Leora felt her heartbeat thunder in her ears. Strike how Nur looked at her with wide, sad eyes. He will challenge Keaton before anyone can speak. A challenge cannot be refused. It is law. Leora stepped back, as if the ground had shifted beneath her feet. Keaton would walk straight into a fight he did not choose, against a man who had planned every step of it, a man who wanted to end him. She turned toward the door, her hands trembling. I have to go after him. Nira grabbed her arm. You cannot go alone. Tecker has men waiting. They will watch every path. Leora pressed a hand to her forehead, trying to think, trying to breathe past the fear wrapping around her ribs. She had lived her whole life surviving storms and hardship, but nothing felt like this. Nothing felt like knowing a man who had sworn to protect her was walking toward danger because of her. She looked at Nira again. Why are you helping me? Nira's voice softened. Because Keaton once saved my brother. And because the pact your father made saved our people. Not everyone from Hawk Ridge agrees with Tecker. Some of us want peace. But if Keaton falls, Tecker will rise. And peace will fall with him. Leora felt a fire inside her begin to climb. She paced, her thoughts racing. Keaton had told her not to follow. But he had given that order believing the council was honest. He did not know the trap waiting for him. He did not know Tecker had already decided the outcome. She stopped pacing suddenly. I need a horse. Nira nodded fast. I know where Keaton keeps one ready. He said it was for emergencies. Leora grabbed her cloak and pulled it over her shoulders. Her hands trembled, but her steps did not. She had spent years believing she was small, believing she needed protection. But now she felt something different rising inside her, something fierce. She could not let Khitan face this alone. Not when the danger came from a lie twisted through generations. Nira followed her to the door. You must take the west path. The ridgemen are watching the others. Laura held the girl's hand for a moment. You are brave. More than you know. Nira lowered her head. My brother loved the peace Ketan tried to protect. I want to protect it too. The words pressed painfully close to Leora's heart. She opened the lodge door. The cold night rushed in, full of wild wind and distant drums. She stepped outside, the ground icy beneath her boots. Nira pointed toward the trees where a small corral sat hidden in the shadows. Leora hurried toward it, her breath coming fast, every heartbeat louder than the last. A chestnut horse lifted its head as she approached. It was strong, broad, and restless, sensing the tension in the air. She stroked its neck with trembling fingers. Please, I need your strength tonight. The horse snorted softly. As if understanding, and allowed her to mount, she turned back to Nira, who stood clutching the door frame of the lodge. Stay inside. Lock the door. Do not open it for anyone. Nira nodded. Liora. Tugged the reins and urged the horse forward. The night swallowed her. Wind tore at her cloak as she rode hard across the valley. The land looked different now, darker, sharper, as if danger had carved new shapes into the hills. The drumbeats grew louder with every stride, echoing against the stones. She felt each one pulsing through her chest like a warning. An old American trail stretched ahead, it winding through pines and jagged rocks. She remembered Khitan's voice telling her once that the west path was the safest in the dark. It hugged the mountain, but stayed hidden by cliffs. Tonight she prayed that would be true. Halfway up the ridge, she slowed the horse to listen. The wind carried something strange. A murmur. Voices in the distance. She moved closer, careful not to disturb a single stone. Beneath a rocky ledge, she saw two men crouched near a burning torch. Speaking quietly, she slid off the horse and hid behind a boulder. Listening, one of the men said, Tekker said the challenge will be quick. Khitan will not stand long. The other man snorted. Good, that pack should have died years ago. The valley does not deserve peace bought by lies. Leora clenched her teeth to keep herself silent. Rage burned in her chest. Her father had died believing the pact meant something. Ketan lived by honor that few men understood, and these men spoke of both as if they were nothing. Her fingers curled into fists. She wanted to step out, scream, throw rocks, anything. But she couldn't, not yet. She needed to reach Ketan before Tekker did. She waited until the men shifted their attention toward the torch. Then she slipped silently back to her horse and rode on. The ridge grew steeper, the air colder, the drum louder. Soon she saw it. A ring of fire up ahead. Shadows of men standing in a wide circle. Their figures looked tall and unmoving, like ancient guardians of something she had no right to enter. Her heart pounded as she guided her horse closer. She could make out Khitan standing inside the circle, alone, cloak billowing behind him in the wind. His posture was strong, his head high, but she could see the tension in the way his hands stayed near his belt. Tekker stood opposite him, tall and narrow-eyed, flames catching the sharp angles of his face. His gaze held triumph. Not yet spoken, but already claimed. Leora slid off the horse and hid behind the large stones at the edge of the clearing. She watched as Tekker lifted his chin. Khitan of the valley, he declared. You stand accused of breaking the honor of your bloodline, Khitan's voice thundered back. My honor is not judged by men who twist the truth. A murmur rose through the crowd. Tekker's smile was cold. Your marriage weakens the pact. Weakens you. Weakens us. Khitan's jaw tightened. My marriage strengthens what your anger seeks to destroy. Several men shifted uneasily. Tekker stepped forward. Then face me here. Now, a challenge. Leora's breath caught. Khitan had no choice. No man could refuse. Not in this circle of fire. Not in front of men who had waited for this moment. but she saw something the others did not. Ketten's eyes flicked once, only once, toward the shadows beyond the circle. Toward her. Her breath trembled. He knew she was here. Tekker lifted his weapon. The blade reflecting firelight, Keton reached for his. The circle tightened. The drumbeat stopped. Silence. Fell so heavy it bruised the air. Leora felt every muscle in her body lock in place as Tekker stepped closer. The fire casting his shadow long across the ground. The challenge had begun. And Keton stood alone. Unless she stepped into the fire before it was too late. Leora did not remember deciding to move. Her body simply obeyed the fear tightening around her heart. Before Tekker's blade could rise any higher, she stepped out from behind the stones and walked straight into the circle of firelight. The crowd gasped. Warriors stepped back as if a spirit had crossed their path. Ketten's eyes widened, sharp with shock. Tekker's expression twisted fast, from arrogance to fury. Leora stood between them, breath shaking but back straight. She felt the heat of the fire behind her, the cold glint of Tekker's blade before her, the steady presence of Keton just a step behind. The circle fell silent, almost afraid to breathe. Tekker snarled, "She has no place here." Leora lifted her chin. "I have every place here. I am the daughter of the man who made the pact that saved both our families. You judge Keton for a bond he did not break. You judge him for honoring a promise. And you blame me for a past I did not choose. But I will not let you twist it into a weapon." Whispers rippled through the circle. Several warriors exchanged uneasy glances. Tekker stepped forward. "Move aside, girl. This is warrior business." Liora did not move. "My father risked his life to save your elder. That pact stands because brave men chose peace over pride. But you want pride back? You want the old fires of war? You want a reason to spill blood so you can rise as leader. But the truth is clear. You are not fighting for honor. You are fighting for power." Tekker's jaw tightened. Enough. Before he could step closer, Keton moved beside her, placing himself half a step in front of her. His voice dropped low, but strong. "Leora, go back." She met his eyes, refusing to move. "You told me to stay safe. But you did not know the danger waiting for you. I will not leave you to face it alone." Keton looked at her with a mixture of fear and pride. She could see the war inside him, the instinct to shield her fighting against the respect he carried for her courage. Tekker raised his blade higher. "She makes you weak." Keton's voice thundered across the circle. "She makes me stronger than you will ever be." The fire snapped high as if answering his words. Gasps spread through the warriors like wind. Tekker's face twisted with rage. He lunged forward, but Keton was faster. His blade swept upward, meeting Tekker's strike with a force that sent sparks flying. Leora stumbled back as the two men collided. The circle erupted in shouts, warriors stepping aside as steel clashed in front of them. Keton fought like a man defending not just his life, but his people, his pact, and his wife. Tekker fought with wild anger, each swing fueled by years of resentment. The firelight flashed along their blades, their silhouettes moving fast and sharp. Leora stood at the edge, trembling but refusing to look away. Her hands curled into tight fists. She whispered a silent plea for Keton's safety, for the pact her father died believing in, for Nira's hope for peace. Tekker swung hard, aiming at Keton's side. Keton blocked, sparks lighting the air. The warriors watching leaned in, their breaths frozen. Another strike, another block, another moment of danger. But then Tekker made a mistake. He stepped too far left, trying to force Keton into the fire. Keton pivoted with controlled precision. He struck Tekker's blade aside and pushed him back with the strength of a man who had fought for honor all his life. Tekker stumbled. The circle watched in stunned silence as Keton's blade stopped at Tekker's throat. No one moved. Even the fire grew quiet. Keton spoke, his voice deep with final judgment. "I do not kill for pride. I do not kill for fear. I only kill when I must. And you, Tekker, have forced enough blood into the land." Tekker's chest heaved. His blade lay on the ground at Leora's feet. Khitan stepped back. Stand up. Face what you tried to destroy. Face the people you tried to lead through lies. Teker rose slowly. His eyes darted around the circle, looking for someone to support him. But no one stepped forward. Not one man raised a voice for him. The truth had settled over them like a blanket of cold clarity. An elder stepped into the firelight. His beard was long, his shoulders wrapped in a ceremonial robe. He spoke with calm authority. Teker, son of Hawkridge, you sought power by twisting stories of the pact. You sought leadership through fear. But truth has revealed you tonight. Teker's shoulders sagged. His eyes fell. The elder turned to Ketan. You showed strength without cruelty, honor without bloodlust. This is the way of true warriors. The pact stands strong in you. The circle of men bowed their heads in agreement. Then the elder turned toward Leora, and the firelight softened on his face. Your courage tonight saved a life, and it saved peace. No outsider has stepped into this circle before, but you stepped in, not as outsider, but as daughter of the valley. As wife of our warrior, you have earned a place in this bond. Leora felt tears gather in her eyes, but she held them back, standing tall. Khitan reached for her hand, pulling her gently into his side. His touch was steady, his breath warm against her temple. The fear she had carried all night melted into relief that shook her knees. Nira stepped from the shadows then. Surprising everyone, she moved straight to the elder, bowing her head. The elder laid a hand on her shoulder, a silent gesture of protection. Khitan gave the girl a nod of gratitude. Leora walked to her and hugged her tight. You saved us, Leora whispered. Nira shook her head. No, you saved Khitan. You saved the pact. The circle of warriors broke apart slowly, each man returning to the shadows of the ridge. The fire dimmed as the flames settled low. Teker was taken away by two elders who would judge his path from here. Leora and Khitan stood alone at the center, the fire now a soft glow at their feet. Khitan turned her to face him. His hands framed her face gently. Leora, you walked into a place no one has dared to step. You risked everything for me? She leaned into his hands, voice soft. I could not let the man I married walk to danger alone. Ketan rested his forehead against hers. When you stepped into the fire, I saw the strength of a woman who carries more courage than 100 warriors. You did not weaken me. You made me whole. Leora held his arms, her breath warming his chest. And you made me feel safe for the first time in my life. He kissed her gently, slow promise against her lips. When they rode back toward the valley, dawn was just touching the sky. The land glowed soft and gold. Peace hung over the plains like a gift from the old gods. Nira rode behind them, wrapped in a warm shawl. She would stay under Khitan's protection now. The valley would welcome her. The pact would protect her, just as her brother once protected their people, as they reached the lodge. Leora looked up at the sunrise and felt a steadiness fill her chest. She had stepped into danger and found her strength. Ketan had fought for honor and kept his heart untouched by hate. The old promise between their families stood stronger than ever. She turned to Khitan. What happens now? Khitan smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Now, we build a life that both our worlds can respect. A life where peace is worth fighting for. A life together. Leora leaned into his side as they stepped inside their home. The fire there burned warm. The land outside felt safe. The bond between them, born out of a promise older than both their lives, had risen stronger than any blade. Raised against it, their story began in fear and shadows, but it would continue in strength, in trust, in love, strong enough to hold a valley in peace.